Welcome to the Tarin It Up podcast. I'm your host, Tarin. We'll be tearing it up, tearing it down, and tearing it apart, dissecting all things related to those who deviate from the standard. From leaders of their industry to leaders of mediocrity, and maybe a gear review or two thrown in. We shoot the shit and let the conversations flow, so if that's not your style, this may not be for you. Otherwise, listen in. Hope to light a fire in you somehow. Hello, everybody. We're back. Another Thursday, another Tearing It Up podcast episode. You know what we've been doing lately, and that's asking you at the beginning of the episode to follow or subscribe if you haven't yet. I hate sounding like an ad at the beginning of the episode, but you guys, this is like how much it helps this tiny little pod that's produced on top of a tall hill in a tiny abode. So please just follow, subscribe, and even more, share if you love this episode or any episode. Share it with your friends, text them the episode, whatever. Not asking you to post a bunch on social media, just talk about it to one person, and that would be super helpful. But today we have an awesome woman that I met in Montana at the Outdoor Media Summit. So just this conversation in itself proves to me that it was so worth going to the Outdoor Media Summit. You guys were very helpful in getting me there. I raised, money to get there so I could take the time off, make the travels. And this episode is a piece of that. So you guys who donated, thank you so much. You brought this connection together. So I have Melissa Wright of Women Who Explore. Their groups they have chapters all over the nation, so I'm excited to chat more. I've got some links to share with you guys on like specific Instagrams, and there's a bunch of Facebook groups too. So with that, I'm going to turn it to Melissa, and I always do ask the guests where you are sitting right now physically in the world as we chat today.
Well, I'm super excited to be here. I am physically sitting on my bed in my bedroom, which is in like the North Phoenix area in Arizona. Currently in my bedroom because the house was just telling Tarin it's completely torn apart. There's a lot of remodeling. The bathroom is non-existent right now. And so the house is chaotic, and this is probably the quietest spot I could find currently. So here in Arizona. Also have to say, Tarin was like a Women Who Explore beacon whenever I met her because she was wearing all teal. And for anybody who knows anything about Women Who Explore, teal is our color. So she had the teal dress with the teal boots, and I was like, "Ooh, this is my person right here. I need to talk to her about the tealness that's happening."
I love that. I didn't even realize. I mean, maybe you said something in the moment. I did get a lot of compliments on the dress and boot match. I was very proud of that because I do not consider myself like anyone who ever can match well or what I think is like cute. I'm like, whoa, no one said anything about this, and I tried really hard for this outfit. So I'm very proud of that Ewer dress and my Ariat boots that matched like so perfectly.
Yeah.
And I gotta put that outfit back on. But yeah, I love that. That's
Yeah,
so
it was
awesome.
it was a good one. I will say the few times, because I ended up buying the same dress that night, and the few times that I have worn it, the people recognized the brand. They were like, "Oh my gosh, you're wearing that dress from Instagram." And I was like, "Well, which company?" They're like, "They got it. It was the Your brand." And I was like, "Well, their marketing is working well because people are recognizing the dress whenever I wear it." So that's awesome.
That's so cool. I'm sure Mallory would be so happy to hear that. And I'm glad you bought it too, because as we were talking in Montana, I know you're on the fence because you are in Arizona. So you're like, how often do I really have the chance to wear a fleece dress? And we brought up the fact like, well, for you, like when it does get like you're cold, it might be doable. So I'm glad that you've been able to wear it a few times.
Yeah, I worn it a couple times, and I'm headed to some snow hopefully over the holidays. And I will say I wanted to wear it last night, but as I told you, yesterday was 79 degrees, and so you can only imagine like in the evening it didn't get that much cooler, and so sadly I did not get to wear my dress. So it is a destination dress for the most part. I have to pull it out whenever I'm in cooler weather because Arizona's just not it.
I love having a destination outfit because you have it forever because you only wear it a handful of times. Like you're like, okay, well,
Yeah.
I've only gotten to wear it like a couple of times a year, so it's still new, it's still great. That's awesome. And it's so funny talking about the just differences in temperature and where we're at because like you said it was 79 degrees yesterday and we started this conversation off kind of talking about like, oh, it's colder for me. And I was going to say, it's actually pretty warm. It's like, oh, now it's 38 degrees. Like, yeah, for you,
It's
you're for like,
heating
oh
up
my
for
God, no, I'd
you.
be freezing. So for me, with my you wear dress, I'm getting into that time of year where sometimes it's like a little too cold because I don't prefer pairing dresses with like leggings or tights or anything. So
Mhm.
I just like to bear it all, but I'm sure there'll be still plenty of times in the winter that I do that because in the grand scheme of winter mountain towns, Tahoe doesn't get exceptionally cold. We're not in the negatives or the teens or something like Montana, Wisconsin, things
Yeah.
places in the east and stuff. But yeah, well, we should meet up sometime in our dresses. That would be great.
Yeah, and maybe I could pair them with leggings if I'm in Tahoe, but here there's no leggings. It's
Yeah,
just it's too warm.
yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
yeah,
Okay.
it's just a dress.
Well, speaking of you being in Arizona, I'm curious kind of from the beginning. I do like to tell the stories of the guests as much from the beginning as possible without obviously, telling every little tiny detail. But I'm curious where you started out. Like, have you been in Arizona your whole life? Where did you like grow up and and then like find your love for the outdoors?
Yeah, so I've spent most of my life in Arizona, originally from Southern California, and family traveled to Arizona. That's like a little touristy town on the Arizona California border, and moved to Arizona when I was 8. So definitely, I'm a desert gal. Much prefer. I love high desert. That's where I feel most at home. Give me some like beautiful granite boulders, like Joshua Tree style. Um, and so I grew up on the Colorado River, and so while I would say like the love of the outdoors wasn't, a focus growing up, I did have access to water sports. It is the town I grew up in was very much like motorsports. So it was boats and quads and wave runners, and there's big races out where I'm from. And so I was into that, kind of growing up. And yeah, the actual love of the outdoors though didn't happen until I was like a late bloomer. Didn't happen until like late 20s, early 30s. And I come from a pretty my childhood was a pretty religious background, and so I was actually homeschooled and got married very young and had a kid straight away. And so that kind of absorbed the majority of my life. Like in my 20s, it was very much young mom, young wife, and still very much involved in being, I guess, I don't want to offend anybody, but very, very religious and kind of like a subsect of it. And so, yeah, it wasn't until I hit my mid 20s where I really started to question a lot of things, and really started to work hard. I started to meet some people outside of my sphere, and um, just really wanted to spread my wings a little bit. I remember looking in the mirror and just feeling so old, and that I'd never experienced like just being young. And in the way that I guess culturally we have this expectation, right, of like your 20s. And so I had this friend at the time, and she had loaned me this book called The Bell Jar. And just warning to anybody, if you're reading The Bell Jar and you're already going through like a midlife crisis, quarter life crisis, whatever it might be, maybe shelf it for a minute. Like just hold off on that book. Just be prepared. Sylvia Plath. I wasn't prepared, and it sent me into a tailspin. And so there's a chapter in this book where the protagonist, the main character, has this dream about this fig tree And this fig tree represents all the paths that she could take in life. So there's like different figs, and each one is like she could, have a career or a family or travel or stay at home or like all these opportunities. And at some point, she becomes just plagued by like insecurity, and she can't make a choice. And so the figs start like withering up and just rotting to the ground. And they like she made no choice, and making no choice is a choice. And so she didn't have those options anymore. And I remember reading this book, I think I was 27, and going to my husband at the time. And it's just saying, like, I chose my figs when I was 18. I don't know that I like my figs anymore. And
Oh.
it was a really hard moment where I realized, like, I kind of set up my like laid out my entire life, and that I wasn't necessarily happy with the choices I'd made essentially as a teenager.
Mhm.
And so that same friend months later also asked me if I wanted to go backpacking in Europe with her, go travel around a bit. And I was like, I have a 6-year-old kid, and I'm married, like I can't do these things. That's not what wives and moms do. And went back and told my husband at the time this crazy thing that Jillian had mentioned. And he was like, just go, like absolutely go, figure it out. And so he's actually, my ex is from Ireland. And that's a whole other story, but went, went and dropped off my son in Ireland with his side of the family. So he got to spend 6 weeks with his grandparents, aunts, uncles, all that kind of stuff. And we traveled around like Eastern Europe and spent a lot of time in Budapest and Prague, and went to this big music festival. It was very spontaneous. And so that was like the beginning of just finding my love of travel and exploring, and like this curiosity that I had about the world, and investing in that, and realizing that I wanted that to be a bigger part of my life. And that kind of morphed into the outdoors. And the same friend took me on my first big hiking trip in Idaho in the Sawtooth Mountains. And so I'd done like ATV trails here in Arizona. I lived like way out in the middle of nowhere. There's not hiking trails, there's ATV trails. I hiked those. So going then straight to like the Sawtooth, and she was like, it'll be fine. It's 12 miles and there's like 3,500 feet of elevation gain. And sure, you could wear your cotton socks and just have it was like a Nike Sling backpack filled with like just water bottles, like plastic water bottles. I just filled it all up with like, and then a sandwich. And we ended up having to like wade through like rapids, and she was like, just keep your shoes on with your socks, it's fine. And I ended up with like, I swear both of my feet were just like one massive blister, just done. And in that moment, I mean, I could have been like, I'm never doing this again. Like that was the worst experience I've ever had. And in some ways it kind of was. It was a very painful experience, and it was obviously a big learning lesson. But it was also the most epic and empowering thing I'd ever done, even more so than traveling in Europe. And I think I was probably about 30 at that time, and just thinking like, I felt like a real badass. And it took me a while to work back up to something of that magnitude. And I actually went back recently and redid the trail a couple years ago. And by my standards now, it's fine. Like
Yeah.
it's a hiking trail in the Sawtooths. Of course, it's going to be steep and whatever. But I remember wondering, I was like, how does she even know where the trail is? We get to a boulder field. How does she know? And now I get to the boulder field. I'm like, well, of course, there's markers. It's fine. It's fine. But yeah, it's been an interesting journey, and discovering women who explore. That was in 2017, and it was just kind of an Instagram at that point. And both Lindsay and I are co-owners of the company now. But we both started at the same time as ambassadors, and it was the first call for ambassadors, 2017. Both of us struggled to like apply because we felt very insecure. We have radically different backgrounds and stories, and we're very different people. But like in that moment, applying for this, both feeling not good enough, is definitely something that we had in common. But we were both accepted and into the program, and we immediately were. I wouldn't say like friends from the start. She started the Portland chapter. I started the Arizona chapter, and we were kind of competitive because we both wanted to be like the best and
Yeah.
get awards and stuff. And so it was like we were very conscious of each other, got along, but we both recognized in each other like this passion for what we were doing, which was in these chapters starting like organizing these events and get-togethers to empower women essentially in the outdoor spaces and make friends, because up until this point in the area that I didn't have any friends. Like my ex wasn't interested in anything really to do with the outdoors. My current friends didn't have any interest. So I started doing a lot of stuff just by myself. And I really found that I wanted people to share this with. And also I wanted to do harder things, and I wasn't comfortable doing, you know, like starting any like crazy backpacking trips that was just by myself. I felt very unsafe. And so this community offered a safe space to try new things. And so fast forward to 2020, um, and the original owners decided they wanted out of the business. They wanted to move on, and they actually approached Lindsay about purchasing it. And she called me and was like, "Do you want to do this?" And I was like, "Absolutely, yes." So yeah, we took over in September of 2020, which is perfect timing to take over a travel, adventure, outdoor gathering, meetup business. You know, we were just like, it'll be fine, it'll work itself out. But it turned out it was great. We had a year and a half of basically rebuilding everything in the way that we had always maybe wanted to or envisioned it. Rebuilt the ambassador program. The trips started from scratch because they had only just kind of started. But now we're like a full-fledged little, you know, travel company, and we've got lots going on. And it's just been, yeah, it's been a crazy adventure, but definitely didn't start with I think Lindsay was definitely more of grew up in the outdoors. Like they went camping and did stuff like that. But I didn't have like that same experience. It was definitely a latecomer. So yeah, when we have people that reach out to us and they're like, "Well, I've never really done it." I'm like, "Great. That's great. You can still join us."
That's amazing. I didn't know all of that background, obviously. And it sounds like you guys have the kind of perfect like dichotomy of where your backgrounds were and your experiences, and also even what you're both like, what you prefer now, or like
Yeah.
your activities, just all around different perspectives and people that when starting a group like this helps reach more people, because since you guys are so different, you can relate to some people, she can relate to some people, and it just widens the audience. She can maybe resonate more with the people who've done things their whole life and might be like, well, I don't know if this is for me because like maybe I, do have the experience, like, do I need this? Whereas other people who are like, I have zero experience, like, is this too much for me? And it's like, no, it's the perfect blend of it all. Like, whether you have experience or not, you're going to find people who, like, you want to be outdoors. That's the main point. Like, you're going to find
Yeah.
other women who want to be outdoors and who want to explore. So whatever your background is on like experience, that doesn't come first at all. It's just the connection of being outside, and then you find your people.
Yes,
And
exactly. And how we care for people and how people accept care is obviously like very different. Um Lindsay does love to like cook for people and care. Like she knows how I like my coffee. When we travel together, she's like first up, goes down to the lobby, gets my coffee, brings it up. And it's just like so sweet, those little details, and that's how she gives to people, and that's like how she cares for them. I'm awful at that. Don't ask me to get you gifts. I am not a gift giver. I struggle with it. I panic. Um, but I like taking care of people on treks. So you got blisters. I've got you. I will do some major blister maintenance with you. I will stay at the back with you. If you're huffing and puffing, I'm huffing and puffing too. It's fine. We can go slow. We'll figure it out. And I think that's more where I shine. So we both definitely have, like, she does trekking as well. I do the cooking, but I think the trips shine is where we are able to match what we love to do.
It's awesome. It's so cool. We talked to the owners of Scenic recently, and they were two best friends who like have been friends since high school, and now they own this business together. And we didn't quite get to this in the conversation, but the way the conversation went, it felt that like, okay, they haven't come to many points where the business or something in their friendship started to kind of collide or anything. And hopefully it never does. But it's so interesting coming off of that conversation of people who two friends who are seem very similar in their past and life and the things that they do and the way that they do things. Obviously, they have their differences, they're human beings. But then compared to you and Lindsay, it feels like you guys are like way more opposite. And that's where there's no hard and fast rule of like opposites attract or you're too similar, whether it's friends or relationships. Like, yeah, sometimes you can see how opposites attract and balance each other out, but it depends on your personality just as much as like, do I want to have that opposition in my life all the time? Like
Yeah.
people thrive better in those things. Like some people might love that, need that. It brings out more for them. Others are just like, yeah, no, I don't want to always face like someone who has a different view or does things differently than me. It seems like you two have a good balance with your differences and then obviously similarities of just getting outside and again just have those different stories to resonate with more women out there and grow women who explore. But beyond that, like just growing your business, your groups, your trips, and all that, I mean, you're reaching women to get them outside. And I think that's where, I mean, that's what I'm here for is to just try to elevate women in any spaces. And we need so much more of that, right? That it's not just like, you're of course you've got a business, you need to grow your business, but the stronger mission behind it all is encouraging women to get out and find their communities and find people that they can do things with, because especially as we get older, I mean, friend circles just naturally get smaller for a majority of us because life just takes us in so many different ways. We all get busy with work, families, whatever it is, that it's so much harder to find time in your schedules that match somebody else's, like even your freaking like partner, like a lot
Yeah.
of times people end up especially with young kids splitting the time with their partner where they're like, okay, well, it's your turn, right, to watch the kids, I got to go do something fun, and they don't get a lot of time together. So when it's that hard even with your partner, it's so much harder with your friends too. I mean, there's memes all around all the time about like, oh, let's schedule a time to hang out. How's, March 2026? Like,
Oh, I literally have a thread going and I have texts missed right now with my friends Kelly and Nicole. Just shout out to them because they're amazing and patient. But um we just can never seem to land on something. And I met, these two gals like way back whenever I worked for another outdoorsy kind of company. And it's just, I think I can count on one hand the amount of times I've actually been outside with both of them. Um, but we've stayed in touch all the time. We're Instagram friends, and we constantly try very hard to meet together. But that is kind of the problem sometimes, especially with outdoorsy, like adventurous people. We plan stuff.
mhm.
And so when we start looking at calendars, it's like, well, I got permits for this already, and I've got this trip planned and with this person. And so it can be kind of tricky to get those. But I think the groups that we have do offer where you can just like bop into just an event that's happening. You can go and you can look at the event calendar and see what's happening. And then you just meet 10 more women that have 10 more calendars
Yeah.
that, you could start like just moving through all the calendars. So you have all of your adventure friends depending on what they like to do and maybe the types of activities and how strenuous or not strenuous they might be. But yeah, I think it is harder as you get older to make those friends. And I think this is the perfect way because I feel like with all the women that join our community, everybody's so different, but the one thing that we have in common is the outdoors. and gathering women together and just supporting each other and empowering each other. And also, I mean, oddly enough, like some of our events aren't even outdoor related. Like around the holidays, there are so many sip and paints. So they're doing ornaments, and there's a Stitch and Bitch in
Oh, I
northern
love that.
Colorado. Amanda teaches, they all get together and they do crochet and knitting and stuff. And there's so many, there's foodie meetups, we have book clubs, and so there's all these access points. And I feel like that's also really healthy, because still meeting up at a trailhead with women you don't know can also be very intimidating.
Mhm.
As welcoming as we are, and we try to tell women just it's okay to show up as you are. And we have all the different levels so they can hopefully figure out like where they feel most comfortable. But it's also like, if it's a 5 mile hike and you start this hike, you're stuck with the women that you're on the trail with for that long.
Mhm.
Um, and so having these entry, kind of points that you can go to a brewery or a coffee shop or a park and kind of get a little bit of FaceTime and get to know people. And then that can lead to all the other activities that are offered through the groups. And then hopefully that then funnels into like our big adventure trips. But yeah, that's kind of how it works. And I feel like I would have really benefited a lot from having that already set up whenever
Mhm.
I was in my mid to late 20s. Starting it was difficult, because again, I talked about like being insecure. But having this now is just really great. I can look on the calendar and see anywhere in North America that we travel. Sometimes I'll pop in. I'll be like, okay. Like even when I was in Montana, met one of the ambassadors that I hadn't met before, got coffee before, Outdoor Media Summit, started. And it was just a great opportunity that no matter where I go, for the most part, there's going to be an ambassador somewhere that I can meet up with.
That's so cool. I definitely want to talk about how you guys have grown it to what it is from just being Instagrams. But first I want to touch on the points of the events that Women Who Explore hosts that are not just like outdoor centric. Love the Stitch and Bitch name just so much, so much. Oh, that's so funny. But those are just, I mean, amazing to have and to offer because, again, time wise, accessibility wise, especially in the winter, right? Like, well, you have less time. We all have less time to get outside because of the amount of daylight. So having these times where we can just meet up, and also just for certain times in your life when it's like, I just don't want to, like, I have no energy, maybe like your mental and physical capacity just may not be there, that like, I don't know if I want to go on a hike, but I want to get together with my friends. I think it's really cool to have those opportunities for women to get together and meet each other in like those environments too, that can be way less stressful and intimidating because I as I guess I would say, I don't know, an experienced outdoors person, I still, and I talk about this all the time, listeners probably are tired of hearing it, but like I am intimidated to go do things with people that I don't know. I'm a part of a bunch of different groups in Tahoe for hiking, mountain biking. I'm on the ILA app that connects women. Like so many different points of connection, but I just kind of like lurk and see what's going on, and like maybe I'll join, but it's hard for me to because I'm like in good physical, like I've shape strength wise, but my cardio's always been a problem, and it's like been getting worse, and not due to like lack of activity. So it gets in my head more. I get so frustrated, like, why can't I like do this anymore? It doesn't make sense. I'm training, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Things shouldn't be getting harder for me. So when I'm with people that I don't know and I don't know what their pace is, I don't know if they're going to be judgmental if I am at a slower pace. And I'm just so much harder on myself. And it's really hard for me to let that guard down because I don't want to be looked at as like not get the invite again because I can't keep up when
Yeah.
I was a person who could and was once looked at as like the person to keep up with or something. Not that I've ever been fast, but still, it's a, you know, I don't think it's necessarily like a ego thing because I don't want to be the fastest by any means, but I don't want to hold people back. And
Yeah.
I don't want to feel
And I think
bad about keeping a pace and, like I said, slowing other people down and like ruining their time and adventure. And I know, again, I preach this all the time to people who are beginners and want to come mountain biking with me. And they're like, oh, but I'm not, like, I'm just starting out. I'm like, perfect. I love that. Like, I just want to show you how much fun this could be. And then soon enough, like, they're beating me on the climbs. And I always struggle with that. It's like I'm slow on the up, but the down is where I shine. But then I don't find my people because then I'm kind of stuck in the back of the pack on the slow, and I'm like, oh no, I want to be like over there. um but yeah, so I just know that the intimidation factor isn't just for people who are newer in any spaces. I know there's a lot of us out there, and it could be just life changes, injuries, taking time off, having children or something. So that's a great way to be able to meet some people first by having these other events, and then getting to know them a little bit better to then
yeah.
go out and do the actual adventure parts with them down the line.
It's interesting, because yes, it doesn't matter if you're, your experience level necessarily. It is intimidating regardless. Like, some women will come into the group and, absolutely fine. They hop in with both feet. Um, I've done plenty of hikes. I've hosted like so many of our trips. Every trekking trip though, I have it in my head. I'm just like, who do I think I am? Like, I like, what if I show up, I'm hosting the trip, and what if I'm the back of the pack? Like, what if I'm
Yeah.
the slowest hiker and all the women are like, why are you even hosting this trip?
Mhm.
You're not even good enough. And so, just so women know, that happens at all levels. And by the way, like, I'm always the middle of the pack. I am just like solidly in the middle, average hiker. I will huff and puff. More recently, just I'm 43, started going into perimenopause, and so that's like a whole other, which is a whole other like bonding experience for
Mhm.
women in my age group, because things are harder. Like, you wonder why. You're like, I'm still doing the things, I'm eating the same, and all of a sudden everything's so much harder. And also, why do I turn beet red all the time? And so it's just one of those things that it's everybody has their insecurities somewhere. And I
Mhm.
remember so vividly, there was one time, last year, I hosted the Kilimanjaro trek, and that you have to summit at midnight. We're leaving, and it must have been like 17,500 feet. That's still dark out, like so far away, like you can't tell where you are. You kind of like lose sense of where you're at and how much farther it is to go, because it's just so long that night. And I do remember just thinking, like, who do I think I am? Like, I should just
Mhm.
lay down. Like, why did I think that I could do this? And I've got all these women with me. And it's just kind of a humbling moment that you kind of have to work through.
Mhm.
And I think that's a little bit of what's different about Women Who Explore as well, maybe from some other companies, because we always have professional guide services. We hire local guides that are local to the area, that are experts in the location that we're going. On top of that, we also send a Women Who Explore host. And so they are not guides, um, but they're like the cool aunt of the group that takes care of people.
Yes.
I want to say, like, they're a mixture of like the mom, the best friend, auntie, concierge. Like, they're just kind of there to make sure, and again, on like trekking trips, emotions always bubble up. Like, I'm
Mhm.
ready for you to have a meltdown on the side of Kilimanjaro. I'll be there with you. Um, and so I think that's where our trips, the adventure trips, shine, just because you have that relatability.
Mhm.
And not that I love all of our guides. Our guides are phenomenal, and they are so encouraging and great. And every, operator that we work with, um, but the hosts are the real life person that you've met months before your trip. They've guided you through your sharp shopping list and packing, and making sure your pack weight is good, and what snacks are the best, and clothing, and are you going to be on your period before this trek, and how do you deal with that? So it gets really personal, and
Mhm.
this is the person that helps guide you through that. And then the guide is there to, lead the way, make sure everybody's safe. I definitely very much appreciate them. But yeah, the insecurity, I'm so proud of people that whenever they come on our trips and they seem to move past that so quickly. And some almost never do. Some will always have that little bit when they're starting a
Mhm.
new something. Every hike might be a little bit different depending on who's hosting it. And sometimes, I think it's also being realistic. We are very encouraging of women in the outdoors and what you can do, but also trying to be very clear about what activity you're getting yourself into.
Mhm.
Um, because sometimes somebody might not be ready. Like somebody Mount St. Helens might not be the good first option for your
Yeah.
first
Yeah.
event with women who explore. Maybe you should just try a hike first. Do like a 5 mile, or something not in snow that doesn't require an axe or like self-arresting or any of that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think we try to have that balance because we also don't want somebody to come and get completely discouraged,
Mhm.
or have to turn a group around. And because it's hard for the group, and then it's also hard on that person, but for
Mhm.
safety reasons we have had to do that. And so we do try to be like as clear and while still being empowering. It's a hard balance sometimes, but I think we do a pretty good job of walking that line.
Yeah, that's gotta be a hard balance to find because imposter syndrome can happen to anybody. Like,
Yeah.
I hosted just a simple basic mountain bike ride here in June. It was like our 100th episode, kind of celebration, and we hosted it with a local mountain bike group. And my co-host, she's not here today, Amber, unfortunately, but she is also not from Tahoe. So I'm like, well, I can't put her at the beginning of the ride. She doesn't know this trail. I was like, but I want to be sweep, but I also, because I also don't want to like keep the slow pace. But I was like, man, also, yeah, are people gonna like they're never gonna wanna do a group ride with me because I, as the, like, host, am not the fastest or the best or this or that, and, man, imposter syndrome is just such a bitch, and we really have to it's so hard in so many aspects of our life to deal with. I deal with it as the podcast and even getting used to saying to people like, "Yeah, I have a podcast." Like, when they ask what I do, I start with the jobs I get paid for, and then I'm like, and I have this little podcast and I need to
And
like,
it's fine.
you
It's
know,
no big deal. You could listen or not. It's fine.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
How long have you been doing it? Oh, like 3 years. Like, "Oh, what?" And so it's like, okay, let's move that up the ladder, especially because it is something I want, to take the main spot. So just kind of owning those things. But yeah, it's just something we're all going to deal with. And like you said, on different trips, you may have a different level of intimidation factor. I love that you have different offerings, and it's got to be a very hard line to walk of finding the empowering part, but also being realistic with people. Like, yeah, this isn't like probably the best first thing to get into. But like I said, if someone goes on an adventure and they're the reason that, a group has to turn around, that will most likely more negatively affect them than
Yeah.
anything else. So it's like just being preventative on that. Does that mean for your treks, expeditions, adventures, whatever you guys like to call them, is there an application process where you can kind of vet those things and have those conversations with the women that are joining the trips?
So for the trips, we don't have an application, so you can book the trip. Usually about 6 months out, people are put into a Facebook group, a private Facebook group, and we start talking about the training program. When also, I guess whenever they do sign up for a trip, it does ask them their level of experience to outline that, so we know ahead of time, like, is this their first backpacking trip? Is this their first hiking trip? So we kind of get a gauge for that, and if it looks like it's a level 5 trip, 5 out of 5, but it's a 1 on the experience level, we have contacted people to kind of get a better understanding. Like, and sometimes it's a little bit different. Like, I had one woman on our Paria Canyon trek. It's 5 days in Paria Canyon, Buckskin Gulch. Um, it's not, there's maybe 1,000 feet of elevation gain through the whole 5 days. You're in a slot canyon, but there's also other things. You have to haul all waste, meaning you've got wag bags. And so pooping, carrying that with you for 5 days, 75% of it is walking in water. You're going upstream and you're in a slot canyon, which is also just, has its own issues. And so, but I did have one woman reach out. She was in her 50s and never done backpacking. And she was like, "Can I do this?" And she's done marathons in the past. And so I was like, "Okay, well, yes, physically, you can do it." And I feel like mentally, if you can do a marathon, you have the mental fortitude to push through with a backpacking trip.
Mhm.
Because I always tell people it's 50% physical and 50% mental. I know I can do just about any backpacking, whatever shape I'm in currently, because I know I have that mental fortitude to just embrace the suck. Backpacking is
Right.
just sometimes going to suck. And so
Mhm.
but it is really hard to gauge that with some people, right? And
Mhm.
so you just have to pay close attention. Like if they talk about bringing out their boots that they haven't used in 10 years, or I mean, like, oh, okay, like maybe we should redirect you to a different trip, or yeah, it's difficult. There is also, though, we do remind women that there is personal responsibility, and you have to have a certain sense of awareness, self-awareness, when you are coming on these backpacking trips. We lean very heavily on, this is a group trip. This is not your trip only. When you come on a group trip, it is a special experience. We take care of each other and we support each other, and all decisions are made in the best interest of the group. And so it's not in the best interest of you. And so if that means that we're on a trekking trip and somebody is really having a hard time, there are hard decisions that have to be made, because you have to contend with like afternoon storms rolling in, or there's a hard deadline for dinner. Like maybe the refugio in the Dolomites, they cut off their dinners like at 6 p.m. Like if you're not
Oh,
there, you don't get dinner and there's nowhere else to go.
oh no.
And so those we give them a lot of information up front. And should they, we don't intend to scare anybody. Obviously, we want to empower them. We want them to be to go on these with us, but they are given all of the information to make an informed decision. And if partway through, we're having discussions and they're like, "Oh gosh, I did not realize this," that's when we can look at switching them into maybe something that makes more sense for them. um but yeah, it's a hard, that one is a very hard line, because we know that people are investing in these adventures and they can be life changing. So many women come on these trips, they're like post divorce, relationships, life changes, empty nesters. This is their first time doing an activity like this, and the level of empowerment that happens, like they're just changed women at the end of these. And I like to say that empowered women in the outdoors are just empowered women, period. So
Yeah.
if you do that trek, that hard thing, you come home and you're like, well, if I can summit Kilimanjaro, I can handle my taxes. I can do
Yeah.
thing. Maybe answering those emails doesn't seem so scary. I just feel like, and everybody has a different activity. Like I know for me, climbing is actually the biggest impact, had the biggest impact, where it really changed something whenever I didn't start climbing until I was 38, I think. 38, 39, 38, and then 39 for mountain biking, I think it was. And so, but climbing just really had like, well, if I can do this, I can do anything. There's nothing I can't do. If I can climb that 1,000-foot wall, I can definitely tackle the things at home, have those hard conversations, whatever. Start a business, I can do it.
Yes.
Uh, so, so we really do want to lean on the side of having women go on these trips with us. But yeah, you should women should know where they're at.
Mhm.
And always be honest with us. We are never going to shame you ever. I've dislocated my knee twice. I have issues with it. Like I said, I'm going through perimenopause, like of hot flashes and all the different things going on that come with that. And so just be honest, just be upfront. That's what we're here for, is to make this the best possible experience for you. The last thing we want is you going on a trip and it's not what you expected or
Mhm.
it's too much for you. We want you to be entering the level that you're comfortable at.
It's amazing. And I mean, sometimes it's hard to be honest with ourselves if you really like you see this trip, it's a dream trip, like, oh my God, I'd do anything. And to receive the news maybe that like or to hear like this might not be the best fit for you, that can be very hard to swallow and realize, but it's not like you're leaving them in the dust and, providing different options for them to at least start out at again because main point just bigger picture is like we want you to have the best time and you're not going to have the best time. It's going to be, you're going to feel like you wasted this money and time on
Yeah.
it if you're not prepared, and we just want you all to be prepared. But again, sometimes it can be hard to have that lens of like, okay, this is the best thing for me when it's something that you really, really want. It's like killing your darlings, like with riding or
Yeah.
something, right? You're like,
Yeah.
okay, I have
Well,
to,
and just
but it's just
just
like
so people on
tabling
the
it. Just
on the other end, like we agonize. And just to be clear, we have not done this that much. Like it is not a common thing for us to do. This is actually a rare case. I think most people are pretty aware.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, when we have had to do that in the past, it is just like we go back and forth. This email, it goes through ChatGPT so many times.
Yeah.
When we go back and forth, like, should we even do it? Shouldn't we do it? Oh my gosh, we feel so bad. So, it can be it's a really difficult because you do want them to have this experience, but also we want everybody to be safe
Yeah.
and
Well, I mean,
then have the best experience.
and that's your main mission or is getting women out to explore. So I can
Yep.
imagine how hard it would be to like, you know, turn someone down from something they obviously have looked into and invested some time in just to like research it a bit. And so that kind of brings me back to the beginning of how you guys even started the adventure side. You mentioned when you and Lindsay found Women Who Explore, there was Instagram pages, so you became ambassadors. And I know that there's still, I'm sure I've touched a tiny portion of them, but the like Women Who Explore Colorado, Idaho, Oregon, all these separate Instagram pages. And now you actually have full on chapters where ambassadors are, leading these group events and things in their areas. So was when Women Who Explore, when you found it and it just had the Instagram, did they have any trips at all? Or was it just kind of social media, a way for people to connect and then like meet up in their areas based on these ambassadors who ran these Instagrams?
Yeah. So whenever Lindsay and I started, I think it was like small trips. They were just starting, like weekend getaway kind of things. And I think that's what they used to be called. Sometimes we still slip into calling them getaways, because they were like the 4, maybe 5 day. Um, and it wasn't until like 2019 that I think they started to run like a handful of bigger international trips. Um, and I think what we were able to do, and there was all like the chapters. There's more now and more ambassadors, more events. By the end of the year, I think all of our chapters combined will have hosted about 1,200 free or mostly free events. Um, and that's all around North America. And I think like 20% I believe 20% of our chapters are in Canada. The
Wow.
most, the rest of them are mostly in the US. And then we have a handful scattered around the world. Um, and so I think uh, it's definitely grown. I think right now we have like 239 ambassadors. Um, and between all of our chapters, I want to say there's over 250,000 women. And so we
Wow.
like to say the communities 500,000 plus, because that includes our Instagram, our Facebook page, all the other things, newsletter, and then incorporating all of those groups. It's pretty robust and it's grown a lot. When we started building the trips, we really just started from scratch, and some of those adventures were just based on, and we still kind of do this, on where Lindsay and I want to go.
Yeah.
Like, and what has been, I figure, like, if there's an activity or a place that I want to visit or I'm excited that's on my bucket list, I can only imagine that it's on somebody else's too. It has
Mhm.
to be, right? At least 10 other people. And so that's how some of them kind of got started. And then listening to other people, we try to get creative in how we host or where we're hosting and choosing different locations and the guide services that we partner with. Like, for example, Mongolia has always been high on my list for a very long time, back whenever I was like a kid and had horses, and so the Mongolian horses was just fascination. Um, and so the guides that we found in Mongolia specifically, they train young women to become guides. And so the guides that we'll have are Mongolian women, they're the translators. And it's this whole education program they have that's meant to empower them to be able to have a career if they so choose, because there's, not as many options for women to have careers like this. And then it also gives them the opportunity if they want to travel farther. And so those are the types of companies that we really try to focus on. Either it's going to be women owned, or they're actually working towards empowering women, or there's some kind of philanthropic, side to it, or they have nonprofit sides to them, or just I mean, honestly, just sometimes coming into a small community and it's supporting, these local small businesses. And so I get that's kind of where we start with building the trip, is who, how are we going to partner? We don't want to, you know our goal isn't necessarily to become like this big company that runs all of these adventure trips. We want to be thoughtful about where we're choosing, and having it be you get kind of immersed in the culture as well. I guess whenever you go, these aren't just vacations. And I mean, they are, I guess, for some people that go on them, but we really want it to be more than a vacation. We want it to be an entire experience, and we want it to be life changing. Um, and I would say also, like, with the events that the women are hosting that are local, they get so creative in the events that they're hosting. Like, there was one we're having, like, it's the end of year, so they're all voting for each other on, like, different, we have ambassador of the year and most outside the box event and most present ambassador. And I've been reading through, like, the most outside the box, and one of them was a goat walk. So they, like, took goats on a walk and then went to get ice cream. And I
Oh
was like,
my
what is
god.
that even? But I would love to go on a walk with a bunch of goats, like, go around town and get some wine and then get ice cream with your, like, goat on a leash. Like, that sounds amazing. So you're, like, seeing the level of creativity and ambassadors. None of the events, like any hiking event, it's all free. It's free to join the groups. There's no charge. The time that there might be money involved is if they are partnering with a company and
Mhm.
they charge. So that could be like a yoga class, self-defense class, climbing nights. The gym will charge that fee, but ambassadors do not take any money. And so it's interesting just to see how creative and outside the box they get with kind of those parameters. Like, who can we partner with to get this free service to do this fun thing that's, while we love all of our hiking events, we like to, like, expand. It's not just the hiking.
Yeah. Amazing. I mean, what you guys seem to have grown since taking over, it just doesn't feel like there's an end, even without wanting to, conquer the entire adventure, like, side of things, or by any
Yeah.
means, that there's still so much room to grow the offerings and to expand and to get women outside. And that brings me to wondering, when you and Lindsay, like, out of the gate of buying Women Who Explore and taking over as owners, did it immediately become, like, full time for you two, or was it like a kind of a gradual thing to where you're like, all right, we're at a place now that this has to kind of be full time? Because I see, like, from your website, you have a big support team too. So not only have you grown, expanded trips, events, chapters, things like that, but you actually have, like, a team of women that
Yep.
aren't just ambassadors and supporting you further.
Yeah. So that's actually, so technically I'm the only full time. for Women Who Explore. So there's like this weird kind of like in between place because I feel like it's projected that Women Who Explore is big and we have
Mhm.
this big team. But the reality is that I'm the one that works full time. Lindsay, I will say, also works full time, but also has a full time job, her day job. And her day job offers a lot of flexibility and it's remote. And so that's how she's able to do that. But she still is working another full time job, which is obviously a lot. If you've ever had
Mhm.
conversations with Lindsay or emailed her or anything, and how quickly she's able to respond, and she builds the bulk of the trips. um and so like putting those together in the bookings and etc., that is a lot on her. And then the support team that we have are all ambassadors, and they are our support team, and they're compensated in various ways, but it's usually like contract work. And so we have a woman, Lisa, who does like all the canvas that you see that are made, our trip booklets that are usually like, I don't know, like 30 pages, and it's all like
Wow.
every trip has one, and it has all of the day by day, all of the information you need, packing lists, etc. She designs and makes all of those, maintains the Facebook group, and then we have other people that help. We have a mentor team. So currently, I believe it's 5 women that are supporting the rest of the ambassadors. We have an onboarding team, but it is very like however many hours they put in, but like kind of contracted. Like the onboarding team's only going to be on whenever we're bringing on ambassadors or we need to remove ambassadors.
Right.
And so we are considering bringing a part-time person on, which would be a big move, because I think we do need more support with the ambassador program. And so that might be something that you'll see posted somewhere, because I think we do need somebody that's not emotionally tied to all the people in the group to help
Mhm.
manage the group. Is what we found is it can be really tricky when, especially Lindsay and I started as ambassadors and friends with so many people, and then morphing into where we're at now, it can always be like a tricky field to navigate. And so yeah, that might be coming up within the next year or so, hopefully. But yeah, for the most part, like I'm here, I'm it. And
Wow. I
Lindsay just as much it, but also answering all the other emails. Like I don't exactly know how I just don't think she sleeps is yeah, definitely. And then her and I, between us, we still lead um 2 to 3 trips a year. Like she's just back from she hosted the New Zealand trip with Emily. It was a camper van, like a road trip, and then
Oh,
she
cool.
did India, Diwali. Um and then her and I are going back to India for Holi in March, together, and then we're both doing Croatia. I do Mongolia. She's on the Giraffe Manor. So we still have, outside of like the 40 trips, and we have so many trip hosts that are hosting these trips that go through like a training program with us. But her and I are still handling a handful of the trips. So it's busy.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I like to pull back that curtain sometimes. I've mentioned how we talk to a lot of like everyone's a small business owner that we talk to, and or not everyone, but the people we talk to who are business owners, they're small business owners, and sometimes we get in our little bubble when it's a business we know, love, and follow, and kind of forget, like we think
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, well everyone's got to know about them, or even just from the outsider looking in. I mentioned this the other day, you just see a website looks good, people are active, you're like, oh, they're thriving, but it's like, no, 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 we forget like what might be happening, and not that you're not thriving by any means, but
Oh,
again,
the
it's just it's
chaos behind.
yeah, and it's great to to pull that curtain back and let people realize that, like, hey, yeah, this is like we've been at this for a long time, but still you're the only like technical full-time who just focuses on women who explore. Lindsay's full-time women who explore, but also has a full-time job. And these other the support team, various ways of contracting and compensation and things that we just have to remember that that's what it takes to build these businesses. It's not all just sunshine and rainbows of, yeah, now we've hired 10 people, things are great, like blah blah blah. Like, nope, it's still very much bootstrapped,
Yeah.
and boots on the ground, and you guys like working very very hard. And I think that's helpful to remind people, when they see businesses too. And that's more reason to support smaller businesses, because it is still very much bootstrapped. There's so much work that goes into it, because you're not at the point that you can just, I'm sure you would love to be able to hire 15 people and not have to
Oh, yeah.
worry about if you can pay them a livable wage, if you can offer benefits. I think any business owner would wants to be in that position without a question, have a great team behind them that they can fully support. And that is not easy to get to at all. But again, the more you can support these businesses, the closer they can get to reaching those goals. So yeah, we just, like I said, have to remember that supporting small means that you are able to support the people on the back end and help this
Yeah.
business truly grow. So
And it's interesting because the years ago I started, and I won't mention the name, but I started it. It was a like an outdoor clothing brand startup. They're still around. I think there's different owners now, but they were growing, decent Instagram, whatever. And I applied to work for them, and I was so excited. I was hired, and I was let go 3 months later. I moved for this company,
oh
and what had happened is they just expanded too quick. They
mm,
got ahead of themselves. They hired a PR company. They hired a few people. They did all these things thinking they were on this trajectory. And yes, they were growing, but they just got too big too fast. And that was devastating at the time.
mhm,
I moved my son from a small town to Phoenix. It's what brought me to Phoenix. So I will always be grateful for that opportunity because that's what got me to move and make some big life changes. But I always remember that I never want to do that to somebody because
mhm.
that was just, it was crushing. And so if that means right now, it's funny when people reach out to us, sometimes they're really anxious to get in touch with us. And so it'll be like they'll send us an Instagram DM, a Facebook message, and an email, and they'll be like, well, I messaged your like social media person. I'm like, it's all me. It's me.
Yeah.
And they're like, I talked to your girl on social media. I'm like, it's still me. Like, they're like,
Yep.
well, I Facebook messaged you. I'm like, me. It's still, you're just messaging the same person.
Yeah.
I have the same answer on all platforms. So, yeah, it's one of those things that I do appreciate pulling the curtain because and seeing behind it because again we try to communicate that we're a small business. Honestly, I don't necessarily have the time to like showcase all of that, but that sometimes we're where we work weekends, we work all
Mhm.
the time, and I don't also want to glorify what they call like the grind, right? Like
Right.
but the reality is when you are starting a small business, and Women Who Explore is still small business, considering it's just me and Lindsay for the most part, with a small team. Um, we do everything, and we're figuring out all of the things and figuring it out as we go. And definitely it's a learning process, and we definitely make mistakes sometimes, and we're like, oh, okay, well, that was a learning lesson, and you move on from it. But be kind to those small businesses, give them some grace
Mhm.
and allow, like, just take into consideration just how much is on their plate. And I don't want to expect, it's not like pity or anything. Obviously I love what I do and I'm so grateful for where I'm at, but it is a lot of work. And I think in the field that we're at, it's also a lot of like emotional work that's on top
Mhm.
of just running a business, because on top of like all the trips and everybody's emotions, because we're like, between Lindsay and I, we're in every chat for every trip that we're doing. We're keeping an eye on things, with our trip hosts. Then we have 20 plus trip hosts, and then we have the 240 ambassadors. And that's a lot of emotion. That's a lot of like
Yeah.
emotion that's happening, and a lot of balancing. So yeah, it's a big lift, but I wouldn't, I don't know. I can't imagine doing anything else now. I've been full time for Women Who Explore for I think I just passed my 2-year mark. And I don't know what else I would do. I'd be like, well, I guess I should just go bartend or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I'll do that for a little while. Yeah, you have to have a varied skill set and just be willing to adapt as well. You try to stay in your lane, but obviously you wear all the hats as a small business owner.
Yeah, it's so hard and tiring, and I've had a few conversations, one with Mallory, a viewer, Heather Kelly of Heather's Choice, like, talking about that social media thing, like, "Oh, yeah, I messaged whoever," and like, "Yep, that was me. Yep, that was me.
Yeah.
Yep, that was me." And it's so
Funny.
funny because when you reach out, because I do it too, obviously reach out via social media and stuff, and I'm always wondering, I'm like, I don't know if I'm talking to, like, this person exactly, like, am I talking to Melissa? Because maybe there's a few people that run it. I mean, I run a couple social medias,
Yep.
but I'm a part of several others have access to that account, so you don't always know, like, okay, maybe someone else is here too. Am I talking to Sarah over here, or am I talking to, like, Alyssa over here? Like, not sure who's answering, but odds are it will be the founder at some point, or owner, whatever.
Yeah.
But
The
but yeah,
trickiest
just
ones I think are whenever I get a random message on Facebook and it's like, "Hey, I can't make the hike this weekend." And I'm like, "Oh, where are you at? What group? Who's the ambassador? Like, who's leading it?" I have there's 110 Facebook groups. I have no idea what hike you're talking
yeah,
about.
where'd you come from? Yeah,
Where
totally.
are you located, please?
Um,
Message your ambassador. That would be super helpful. But yeah, we get a lot of those too, trying to field all of that as we go.
oh my gosh. Well, what you've built and what you're continuing to build is amazing, Melissa. I've really enjoyed hearing the background story from you. Also, I didn't touch on it in the moment, but I feel like it deserves a mention in the fact that you started climbing at 38 and mountain biking at 39. We like to remind our listeners a lot. Our core audience kind of ranges between like 28 and 48, and they're in very different places of life. And like, it's just, again, never too late to start a new thing. Yes, it can be scary as shit, but if that thought's coming back to you over and over, do it. There's all these resources and groups like Women Who Explore, where you can find other women who are in the same situation, same experience level. So just, seek these things out, seek these groups out, before you dive right into it, and try to find maybe people you can relate with first, because of course it's going to be scary as shit to try to go to the climbing gym or something with the experienced, like, partner you're with, whether it's a boy, a girl, romantic interest, whatever. Like, having bad first experiences are what turn you off from doing something, like, ever again. It's like, first
Yeah,
impression can mean a lot. So take a little bit of time, know you're not alone out there, and find, like, you can find people to do these things with and to help you get there, that you are not the only one at that age who's never done this or that before. And I know it can feel like that. So just remember, yeah, get the courage, go out there, try the thing. You're
just
not
do
alone
it.
in it. Yeah, just
Yeah,
fucking do it. Before we leave, I would love for you to just tell the audience the best way to connect with Women Who Explore, or you personally, whatever you prefer, the best ways to find. Obviously, we know now you are
yeah,
behind the Women Who Explore Instagram, so you'll find Melissa. Just message, "Hey, Melissa."
yeah. Just hit me up on all social
Yeah.
media apps. No, so our website has emails, etc. There's the contact form. The info box comes directly to Lindsay and myself. So if you want to hit us both up, that's the best way, because we share that account. Otherwise, it's Melissa at womenwhoexplore.com. But yeah, website's just womenwhoexplore.com. Instagram's the same, Facebook's the same, and highly recommend jumping onto the community part of our website. That's where you're going to find our local chapters. If one is missing or if there's a broken link, please let me know, because I also maintain the website. and and that doesn't mean there's not necessarily a group in your area. It just means that maybe I haven't been able to post it yet, or fix it, or I didn't know it was broken. So please, just, like, it's cool to reach out. And if you're interested in following along, like, on, like, what trips we're launching and things that we're doing, our newsletter is the best way to follow along. That's where we'll make all the announcements. But yeah, just follow us along on social media. You can always DM. I will say Instagram gets buried in that, like if we're not friends or whatever, it goes into that
Mhm.
folder. And I will just share a pet peeve. Maybe the interwebs will hear me, but I hate that every tag is a message that comes through for Instagram for us.
Yeah.
And that is our big, because like messaging is fine, but messages do get buried because every time somebody tags us, which is a lot, um, it's just buried. I'd love to turn that feature off, Meta, please.
Yeah, or like another they have like the request folder, right? And so it's like, why can't you just
Yeah,
have another separate folder
just
that's like
tagged.
tagged? But because I mean, you have the on your grid the option to hit like the, what everything you've been tagged in. But when you're just tagged in stories, yeah, it always comes
Yep,
through as messages, and I'm sure it's a majority stories. Yeah, that's annoying, especially because like you're a business who's trying to see messages and get
yep,
feedback from people, and now you can't get to those important things. Uh,
yeah,
yeah, let's spread that out to the meta
yeah.
people.
It's
Uh,
listening somewhere, right?
yeah, totally. You're gonna
On my phone,
turn on your
please.
phone and yeah, it's gonna come up with results of like how to turn this feature off or
Yeah.
something.
Oh,
Or
thank goodness.
support, contact support. Awesome. Well, I'm glad you pointed out to the community. I was just gonna ask you like where people can find chapters, and I'm sure if there actually isn't a chapter in your area, then same thing, reaching out to
Yep.
Melissa and expressing that and getting in the conversation of
Would you
how,
like to start
why,
one?
yeah, like I'm sure there's other people around, and maybe you just need to create a bigger group of women to get one actually off the ground and going. Well, it's been lovely chatting with you, Melissa. Again, I enjoy hearing the stories of kind of how you got started with it all and ways that people can connect with you. And I think that sharing the behind the scenes can help people, again, just relate more to your business and again, rather than just scrolling and like, where's a women's group? But like, we get to hear the story. We know why we connect with this particular group. And yeah, I hope you all go out there and give Women Who Explore a follow. You know that the links will all be in the show notes so you can connect, find a local chapter, follow them along on Facebook, and maybe go on one of their trips or fun events. And thank you all for listening. Thanks again so much, Melissa. We'll talk to you guys all next week.
Yeah, thank you
Bye.
so much.
You're welcome. We hope you enjoyed this episode and would do us a huge favor, since we don't have any sponsors or anything like that, and would rate and review us on whatever platform it is you use, Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, whatever it is. And if you're listening and downloading just through the website, tarinituppodcast.com, leave comments. We'll definitely engage back with you. And on social media right now, we're just on Instagram. Tarin It Up Podcast is the handle. Like the post, share the post, comment on the post, whatever it is you got. Show us your love so we just stay relevant and show up in the rankings at all. So again, rate and review, please. And we'll see you next time. Thanks.